Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, wherever you're happy to be joining us from. I'm Jason Marzak, Senior Director of the Atlantic Council's Adrian Arsht Latin America Center. To those of you who are joining us over Zoom or over Twitter live stream, welcome to today's virtual discussion, important discussion on the Summit of the Americas takeaways and next steps that we are hosting this discussion today in partnership with the U.S. Department of State. Now, 10 months ago, the Adrian Arsht the Adrian Arsht Latin America Center and the State Department launched the Road to the Summit campaign to hold open and inclusive conversations on key issues that would be covered in the summit, including democracy, economic recovery, climate, health resilience, digital transformation. Now, in the month since the conclusion of the summit, which many of us here today are delighted to have been able to join, we have been looking ahead at the implementation of the wide-reaching deliverables that address these priorities. The Americas Partnership for Economic Prosperity aims to drive our hemisphere's economic recovery and growth. The Los Angeles Declaration on Migration and Protection seeks to transform our approach to managing migration in the Americas. And the U.S. Caribbean Partnership to address the Climate Crisis 2030 will advance climate adaptation and resilience and clean energy programs across the Caribbean region. And those are just a few of the highlights from the announcements of the summit. But above all, the announcement to host an inaugural City Summit of the Americas in 2023 stands out as a force multiplier that will strengthen the implementation, frankly, of every other objective in the summit. The City Summit will connect local communities and commerce across the Western Hemisphere by convening regional mayors and subnational leaders in Denver, Colorado next year. This incredibly innovative approach from the U.S. government taps into local leaders' abilities to provide a bridge between national policies and incredibly important everyday citizens, and also to translate deliverables into actions that are felt by people at the local level on a daily basis. As I discussed in a Twitter space last week with Mayor Hancock and Mayor Garcetti, the City Summit has the potential to catalyze coalitions of locally elected officials from across the hemisphere that can collaborate to address shared challenges. And these relationships can build a strong foundation of trust and a network for action-oriented policies that goes beyond the federal level by connecting and inspiring local governments and leaders all throughout our hemisphere. Our conversation today focuses on tangible next steps for empowering local diplomacy and the next phase of the U.S.'s chairmanship of the Summit of the Americas. I'm thrilled to be co-hosting this event today with the Truman Center and also with the Inter-American Dialogue to maximize our shared knowledge and reach on this important topic. The Truman Center's City and State Diplomacy Task Force recently released an incredible report presenting recommendations for increasing subnational engagement in the United States. And the Inter-American Dialogue hosted the Mayor's Summit on the sidelines of the Summit of the Americas, an excellent event that launched a number of subnational initiatives. So we'll begin today's event with a conversation with Brian Nichols, Assistant Secretary of State for Western Hemisphere Affairs. And then following my conversation with Assistant Secretary Nichols, we'll turn over to a conversation on new opportunities for subnational collaboration in the Americas. And I'm delighted that that conversation will include Senator Councilor Delroy Williams, the Mayor of Kingston, Jamaica, Ambassador Nina Hachigian, the Deputy Mayor of International Affairs for the City of Los Angeles, and also Joseph Losavillo, the Manager of Ecosystem Engagement and Development at MasterCard's Global Cities Initiative. And it'll be moderated by our very own Marianne Walker, who's a Senior Advisor for the Summit of the Americas at the Adrian Arsht Latin America Center and also a member of our Advisory Council. Our event will then conclude with a conversation on next steps ahead of the City Summit with Mayor Hancock of Denver, Colorado. That will be moderated by Rebecca Bill Chavez, CEO and President of the Inter-American Dialogue. Before we kick things off in full, I'd like to remind our audience that this event does have translation. La traducción en vivo en español está disponible en su pantalla. Haga clic en su pantalla en la esquina derecha de la pantalla. The live translation in Spanish is available for all viewers, and it can also be accessed by clicking on the globe at the right corner of your screen. We also do have live closed captioning available via the link found in the chat now. So now I'm delighted to welcome Assistant Secretary Brian Nichols to the conversation. Assistant Secretary Nichols has held this position for, well, I guess in September will be a year. He, prior to taking over as Assistant Secretary, has a long history of diplomatic service in the region and around the world. our region, among other things, serving as ambassador to Peru and also leading the Office of Caribbean Affairs. So, Assistant Secretary Nichols, during the Summit of the Americas, the State Department announced several deliverables, and I already mentioned a few, that will guide U.S. policy toward the hemisphere in the years to come. These deliverables focus on health resilience, economic prosperity, energy security, and climate change. From your perspective, what were some of the most tangible outcomes from Los Angeles that you've heard from other hemispheric leaders in the last few weeks?
Great, thanks. It's wonderful to be with you again, Jason, and always a pleasure to be with such a knowledgeable group of insiders and cognoscenti. So thank you for having me. And the summit was a huge success and really focused on delivering in key areas that will make people in our hemisphere's lives better. In terms of the specific feedback over the last few weeks, the Los Angeles Declaration on Migration and Protection, dealing with the global migration crisis that we face that's really manifesting itself in our hemisphere, and working together to address the causes of migration and help people stay where they are, help them migrate legally and safely when they wish to do so, and providing countries with the tools that they need to address this multifaceted challenge of migration. Other areas, right after this meeting, we will be convoking one of our working groups with the CARICOM, Caribbean countries, and the Dominican Republic to talk about follow-up to the meeting between the president, vice president, and their CARICOM counterparts. The group that I'm working on is dealing with food security issues. There's also energy and finance issues encompassed in that conversation. The commitments that people undertook around democracy as part of the summit are very important. But there are a number of things where we're just beginning our work, and the Americas Health Corps, for example, where we're going to train 500,000 healthcare workers around the hemisphere to address the needs of the communities and peoples in our region, is an important step, and people are very excited about that. And that will, encompass full range of healthcare professionals. The $50 billion that our multilateral development banks are providing, particularly area of climate. The renewable energy for Latin America and the Caribbean initiative, where we're going to help countries around our hemisphere reduce their reliance on traditional fuels and move to a much greater renewable energy mix throughout our hemisphere, is something else people are excited about. Our new initiatives around 100,000 strong for the Americas, where we're focusing on innovation and climate issues, and we've raised over $3 million to provide scholarships to young people and university students around our hemisphere to work on climate and innovation issues. And then sort of getting to the specifics that perhaps bring us here today, our initiative for democratic renewal with $477 million to support democracy and human rights in the region through the Citizen Forum of the Americas, and build stakeholder capacity to engage with governments, the summit process, and monitor government implementation of summit commitments. And that comes in the context of a hemisphere that's 86% urban, the most urbanized part of the world, both North and South America. And the City Summit will really be able to focus on the parts of our hemisphere where most Americans live. And I think that's going to be really important.
Mr. Secretary, thanks for that response. We'll get in the City Summit in a moment. I want to take a step back. You mentioned a number of different issues, the LA Declaration, the working groups. You're currently working on their there for the food security working group, healthcare workers, climate renewable, 100,000 strong. We're a month out. The U.S. still will hold the chairmanship of the summit for another 11 months. What concrete objectives do you have for the implementation period of all these different announcements that were made and that you just shared with us? What are your top priorities insofar as what you want to accomplish in this remaining chairmanship period?
Well, I think key focus areas will be delivering broadly in our hemisphere on issues like digital access, which I think is something that really has captured imaginations. Food security, energy, those are things that people are very much focused on. Among the food security commitments of our hemisphere is all the major food suppliers, food producers in our hemisphere agreed that they were going to coordinate better and work on ensuring that key inputs moved across markets better, that people get the access to things like fertilizers that they need, that we do everything we can to keep the price of key staple products accessible to average men and women in our hemisphere. So those types of activities, I think, are very salient given the food security challenges that we've seen, both from the pandemic and then as a result of Russia's further invasion of Ukraine. The other things, working with governments around the hemisphere on America's Partnership for Economic Prosperity and building the architecture out to address the economic growth and development issues that will help average families in our hemisphere be more successful, more prosperous in what is, in terms of the international economic environment, a very difficult moment. Working on the continued transformation of our multilateral financial institutions so that they're able to provide timely and sufficient finance at all levels to make sure that we're able to implement policies that our peoples need are just a few of the things that we'll be working on.
And the multilateral institution, there's been a lot of positive response to the desire for transformation of multilateral institutions to make sure that those institutions are best poised to deliver the assistance needed, given where the region is today: digital access, food security, energy, economic growth and development. Really important, and of course you can count on the Atlantic Council to be a partner in helping to move those different issues forward. I want to turn now to the City Summit, which, as you mentioned, one of the most innovative deliverables announced that seeks to empower locally driven diplomacy by convening mayors and subnational leaders across the hemisphere. And Mayor Hancock is here with us today in his city of Denver, Colorado, next April. You started talking this a little bit previously, but it'd be great to have you drill even further down on ways in which you see the City Summit connecting with these many deliverables that you just mentioned as part of the Summit of the Americas.
So thank you. In April next year in Denver, we're very excited about this opportunity where we're going to see community level leaders, mayors, municipal officials, the private sector come together and focus on issues of concern to people in urban areas. And as I said, that's a majority of the population of our hemisphere by quite a bit. The digital agenda for transformation in the Americas, to the extent that we can get rapid broadband access to people in our hemisphere, that makes a huge difference to their access to education, their ability to do commerce. Those who had access to the internet were far better able to weather the worst moments of the pandemic, for example. And so doing things to deepen that are important. Sharing best practices around issues like urban development and planning, access to healthcare in urban areas, I think is a key overlap. leveraging the most modern technologies around renewable energies for urban areas. We have a lot of really exciting climates and topographies in our hemisphere, and renewables play a key part of the energy mix in many countries. So the biggest one that comes to mind is Brazil, but there are others like Costa Rica, which have a very high, near 100% renewable electricity mix. Countries like Brazil producing biodiesel and green biodiesel. So there's a lot of exciting things going on that can be translated into urban areas. And we want to make sure that the mayors and other officials are cognizant of what those opportunities are and sharing those best practices.
It's really important, because we'll get to hear from the mayors, but how local leaders are really at the forefront of some of the different challenges that people face on a day-to-day basis, and that connection among mayors is vital for them moving ideas forward, as well as Secretary, I know a priority for the U.S. government as well as part of the summit has been also showing the importance of the summit to the U.S. Population as well. Why this matters for American livelihoods, why this matters for Americans on a day-to-day basis. What is your perspective on how this renewed focus on subnational diplomacy can impact U.S. livelihoods? Why is this important to people that live in this country? And also, how does it help to also further support the Biden administration's goal of creating a foreign policy for the middle class?
Well, there are going to be great opportunities for the American private sector to engage and to meet with potential clients from around the hemisphere. We know that there will be a major private sector event in parallel with the sort of public sector piece of this, as well as civil society engagement. And a significant percentage of the participants in the summit will be from the United States. We'll be able to talk to them and share best practices around their exports, around their educational policies, for example, health development policies. And from a private sector standpoint, the United States brings a huge amount to the table in the kinds of technologies and solutions that cities around our hemisphere need. So I think this is going to be a very big opportunity for the U.S. private sector to engage, and an opportunity for our own mayors to learn from what's going on in other parts of our hemisphere. And there are, dozens and dozens of cities, even just like in Brazil, with over 1 million people. So people don't focus on that when they're looking at the globe, but there really are a large number of places in our hemisphere that are pioneering some very interesting practices.
It sounds like this could potentially even have ramifications kind of for the work of State Department writ large, even beyond the city summit. Your recognition of the importance of cities. Do you foresee this summit as being part of a kind of a broader strategy in the department to really focus even more so on the role of subnational diplomacy in cities?
Let me just note that Secretary Biden is always reminding us of the importance of getting out of the capital city and seeing the whole country for our diplomats overseas. And that engagement with populaces around the nations that we are engaged with is vital. We want to make sure that communities from the North Pole to the South Pole are engaged, that we're hearing what they have to say, that we're sharing best practices, and that we're promoting the kinds of dynamic opportunities that people around our hemisphere need to see. This is a crucial moment in the world, and we believe that cities have a lot to offer, and they need to deliver for their people.
Well, Assistant Secretary, thank you so much for joining us, for taking time out of your the working group conversations on food security, and again, congratulations on all the excellent work leading up to the summit now and the implementation of the summit deliverables.
Thank you so much, Jason. It's great to be with you again. I look forward to seeing you soon.
Great, thank you so much. I am now happy to introduce Marianne Walker, Senior Advisor for the Summit of the Americas, the Agent Orange Latin America Center, who will moderate our panel discussion. So Marianne, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Jason. So I'd like to introduce our panelists, Senator Conciliar Delroy Williams, Mayor of Kingston in Jamaica, Ambassador Nina Hachigian, Deputy Mayor of International Affairs for our city of Los Angeles, and Joseph Lasabio, Manager of Ecosystem Engagement for MasterCard Global Cities. Mayor Williams, it has come to our attention it's your birthday, so I would like to start by saying happy birthday to you. We certainly all wish we were celebrating with you in Kingston. You are several steps ahead of the U.S. Department of State as you convened an inaugural Caribbean Conference of Mayors back in 2018. Why did you decide to host this conference? At the closing ceremony, you stated, "We have similar issues confronting us as local government practitioners." On a larger scale, across the Caribbean and also the Americas, what similar issues do you see between you and local government officials? What are the lessons in your experience that you can offer for this upcoming City Summit of the Americas in Denver?
Yeah, so firstly, the Caribbean countries have shared history, culture. So we have a shared and common history and culture. And also the issues confronting cities and townships across the Caribbean are very similar. So we felt that, and if you look at our exposure to the climate, our economic background and economic activity, our trade patterns, they are very similar across the Caribbean. So we felt that it would be very important for us to convene and to pursue these our economic pathways and discuss and share ideas with respect to how we grow our cities and townships, but also looking at the challenges that are facing us and how we can come up with common approaches and best practices to resolving common urban challenges. And so we felt that it was important for us to meet. And so we did meet, and out of that, I would say there were some very useful outcomes. We have deepened our relationship, and I've been to several Caribbean cities since then to continue the dialogue. And we have been very, as a city, we have been very helpful and cooperative in terms of addressing disaster management and disaster risk management and sharing approaches with respect to that. We share the same geography. We have the similar exposure to climate change and to various natural hazards, natural phenomenon. So that was important for us. Out of the conference, I would say that what came up is among mayors felt that far more resources should be focused on studies and research at the level of cities. They felt that you could probably glean far more useful information if you focus research and studies at the city level. And there's a good reason for that. Urbanization, the figure is that approximately 60% of the world's population will soon live in urban centers. So urbanization is here to stay, at least for now. And we all know with urbanization comes challenges and issues. And so we felt that it is important for cities to begin to plan and to prepare. And for example, in Kingston, we have an issue with solid waste management. You know, that's a big issue here for our residents. And it's when we had the conference, we recognized that that was also a major issue across the Caribbean. As a matter of fact, we were in Sweden a few weeks ago, and we had a meeting of African city mayors. That was a link between the Caribbean mayors and African mayors. And we also recognize that they're having similar challenges with solid waste management. There are challenges with respect to plastic bottles entering their harbors, and we were able to share an approach which we have been using here in the Kingston Harbor to great success. And we were able to point the African mayors we were able to point them to avenues and pathways that would be able to help. So the problems are beyond the Caribbean. The challenges are beyond the Caribbean. And I'm just referred to solid waste management. There are far more issues with respect to climate change, with respect to public health, with respect to disaster risk, managing disaster risk, and also preparation and management of disaster, and also issues pertaining to, in a large number of Caribbean countries, landslides and flooding. Flood mitigation is also a major issue here. I would say to the summit, looking forward to the summit, I would say it would be important to create forums that would allow mayors I would say it would be important to create forums for major specific issues, and not just open the forum for issues and challenges and discussions, because those are many, and you might not be able to zero in on particular issues and particular approaches. I would say if the conference could and the summit could, it would be good to identify major issues and challenges and create forums for mayors to discuss those specific issues and challenges, and just collaborate on those and see what the outcomes are.
Yeah, thank you, Mary Williams. That is so important. And obviously, we're all following in your footsteps here, as what you did in 2018 was very important. Ambassador Hachizian, you are the first deputy mayor of international affairs of our city of Los Angeles. You have a unique perspective of the benefits of city-to-city collaboration, as well as logistical steps for creating local offices in international affairs. To start off, please share a brief example of how subnational relationships have facilitated greater cross-border understanding and catalyzed positive outcomes in both Los Angeles and abroad. How do you think your role can be done differently in different municipalities across the Americas? And what suggestions do you have for mayors from smaller cities who are interested in strengthening their international relationships, but lack the funds or training to do so? What federal resources are needed?
Thank you for those series of good questions. Thanks to Atlantic Council and to the Inter-American Dialogue and Truman Center, and thanks to my esteemed co-panelists. What I've found, to answer the first question, is that when mayors come together, that inspiration follows. And Mayor Williams, talked about this specifically, but a couple of examples from LA. We were inspired to put in rapid bus lines after we saw them in Rio, in Brazil. Mexico City's earthquake early warning system gave us inspiration for our the kind of bike festival in Bogota has inspired a ciclavia event in Los Angeles that happens a couple of times a year, and we shut down parts of the city just for bicycles. And I'd say it goes both ways. During the summit, we were able to brief President Boric of Chile on our water, how we manage water in Los Angeles, because we're both areas faced with serious drought concerns. We connected Mayor Lopez of Bogota to our sanitation department to talk about certain kinds of waste management. And I think those may well continue beyond the summit. We've gotten advice from London on how to host a successful Olympic and Paralympic Games, which we have coming up in 2028. And then, during COVID, we had lots of sharing and solidarity among cities in various convenings. The mayor at that time was the chair of C40, and he convened that group of climate megacities to talk about COVID. And we learned from Seoul about drive-through testing, for example. So those are just some examples of what happens when mayors get together and cities get together to talk about their shared challenges. Of course, jobs as well come from trade and from investment in both directions. We have another program to send young people overseas on their first trips, community college students. We're lucky to have now the wings of Mexico that are installed near our Griffith Park Observatory, which are beautiful. So there's obviously cultural collaboration as well. And one last one, which I think is probably the most dramatic example, is that Mayor Garcetti was able to bring the commitments of 1,049 cities to COP last year to say that everyone will reduce their emissions to net zero by 2050 and half by 2030. In terms of the second question that you asked about how to create, an office like this, I guess my suggestion would be for smaller cities, or for really any city, because we operate this way too, is to look for partners, and that could be diaspora communities. It could be retired foreign service officers. It could be world affairs councils, or other kinds of nonprofits or NGOs, or universities, or even high school, international affairs professors, and to begin conversations around what your city needs and wants, and what would make the biggest difference, and what are the key issues, and then think about basing collaboration around those relationships.
Yes, brilliant examples, Nina. Thank you very much. I was able to witness a lot of that and see movement here in the city brought about by bringing information in from other countries. So thank you for all the work that you and Mayor Garcetti have done. Mr. LaSavio, speaking of resources, you have worked extensively with MasterCard's City Possible program, an initiative that have partnered with over 200 cities to advance inclusive and sustainable urban development. How could similar initiatives be scaled across the region ahead of the upcoming City Summit in Denver? And what role do you see the private sector playing in supporting local mayors as they create locally driven sustainability plans? How can we use the City Summit as a catalyst for greater private sector investment in equitable and sustainable urban development? And from a private sector perspective, how are the benefits of investing? What are the benefits in investing in smaller cities in addition to metropolises such as Los Angeles and Denver?
Well, thank you so much. I'll echo all my fellow panelists. Thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be here and talking about this really important subject. So on your first question on how to scale similar initiatives. So as much as I would say I would love everybody, all cities, to join the City Possible Network, I really think more companies should try and do similar programs. And I think an important part of the how is really why. So why we did this is because we really found that the traditional way of creating solutions from the cities, from the private sector side, was really a lot of, we've created this thing that's going to solve all your problems, and we're going to bring it to you, and don't worry about it, it'll be fine. And nobody wants to be the first to do things generally. And I think that's particularly true of governments because, it's a lot of risk there. And so what we did with City Possible, we really created this ecosystem of urban innovation that has us. It has now over 330 cities. It has academia. It has other industry partners. And really the function of it is to help give cities that platform. And as Senator Councilor Williams was saying, and Ambassador Hachagian, giving cities that space to talk to each other, talk about their challenges, share best practices. It helps them, gives them that opportunity to exchange, learn from each other, but also helps us understand that the solutions that we're building are fit for purpose. And it provides the cities, when we're kind of rolling out these new solutions, that support space where, well, there's another city who's experiencing this challenge, so I know I'm supported there. There's academics in this group, so in terms of measurement and analysis, we have support there. And then, of course, we have the support of MasterCard and the kind of building. So I think it's something that all companies should really do. I really think that in terms of helping cities with that sustainability plan, I think it's really just back to that collaborative nature of working with cities, bringing them together in groups and really making sure that, you understand where they're coming from and bringing to bear your resources. And then on your second question of how cities can use the City Summit is a catalyst for greater change. So I actually came to MasterCard about a little over a year ago from the World Economic Forum. And so where I worked in their cities and infrastructure urban services team. And these types of public-private multi-stakeholder conversations are something that are really important. But I think there's a misconception about World Economic Forum that Davos is everything. And what it really became towards the end was a check-in point for the work that we were doing all year round on a variety of subjects. And I really think that's how we should think of these meetings like the Summit of the Americas, like the City Summit, use it to convene those different stakeholders, the public sector, the private sector, have this opportunity to talk out the issues, get some commitment, and to launch into something more long-term so that when we come back, we can say, here's what we did over all this time. And on that question of from the private sector perspective on investing in smaller cities versus larger, and I'm sure a lot of our folks here who work with cities will say this, I really found it's interesting what cities end up comparing each other with and trying to learn from each other, because it's not always based on population size. I think there's a lot of characteristics that cities have that they can learn from each other on, whether it be the industries that they're in, the type of climate challenges that they face. And so what I would say there is not only do you never know where you're going to get those really great insights, those really interesting challenges, and those great best practices come from, they could come from anywhere. But I would also say that in addition to being able to, work with a smaller city, maybe being able to scale something larger, cities are so much more than just their population number. I think there's so many interesting things about each. You have, less now, but at one time cities in China that produced 80% of one small, very important part of the supply chain. You have a city like Huntsville, Alabama, in the deep South, small to medium-sized city, full of rocket scientists. So you never know what you're going to find in any city around the world. And I think it's always important to, take the chance and understand what you can get from them. So, and what they can, what you can get back.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Losavio, and for sharing all this information and your leadership here from the private sector. So I'd like to ask one last question. As mayor, deputy mayor for international affairs, and private sector leader, each of you represent a key stakeholder who will play a crucial role in revitalizing substantial engagement in the Americas for this upcoming City Summit. Mayor Williams, my question to you and Ambassador Hachagian and Mr. Losavio is, how do you see yourselves collaborating in advance of our upcoming City Summit? Sorry, so the question is first for Mayor Williams, then Ambassador Hachagian, and then Mr. Losavio. And the question is, how do you see yourselves collaborating in advance for the City Summit coming up in Denver next year?
Well, collaboration is important prior to the summit, and it's also very important after the summit, because our expectation would be that after the summit, that we would have greater collaboration between cities and in terms of addressing issues cities faced. We also, I believe that we should have, prior to the summit, we should have greater conversations to arrive at, because it would be difficult to have that, to arrive at that at the summit, to arrive, but it could be an outcome of the summit, to arrive at targets and goals. I believe that we should have discussions prior to so that at the summit, we can set targets and goals for cities. Targets and goals are very important for us and coming out of a summit like this, because it gives you, it allows you to pursue, and pursuing is important. So I would say that collaboration would be important for that. Also, I believe that prior to the summit, we have to have this collaboration to also arrive at a document that is signed at the end of the summit. I believe that at the end of the summit, we should be signing, we could call it whatever we want to call it, but we should be signing a document that it's not binding, but it would commit us to meeting and to continuing discussions, and to commit us to working together with each other, and in addressing what the document would outline various issues that we would address. So I think the collaboration is necessary. We can do it as we approach the summit on using our online platforms. And if necessary, we could meet prior to the summit in small groups. But I believe that I would say for these 3 items, it would be good for us to meet prior to so that we can have agreement before the summit.
Agreed. Thank you, Mayor Williams. Ambassador Hajigian, same question to you.
I really like Mayor Williams's ideas. I think we're gonna, we just hosted a summit, so we're happy to, and already are talking to Denver about, what we've learned and any lessons that we've garnered from, just hosting a big summit, first of all. I think second of all, we're always available to talk to, anyone at the State Department or in any of these wonderful think tanks about how cities cooperate and how we think and how we are how we are motivated, to be. You can see from this conversation, we're very practical and very concrete in what we think about and how we want to deliver to our residents. So just we'll be around to talk to anyone who wants to about how to best structure a conversation with cities to get the maximum outcomes.
Yes, thank you so much, Nina. Mr. LoSavio, same question.
Yeah, I mean, I think in addition to what everyone else has just said, I think we are happy to help leverage our global network as well. I know that this is a very America's focused meeting, but I think that there's still so much to learn from around the world, and however we can help from Europe to Africa to Asia. As we've already heard, there's so many learnings there for everybody. I think that's really a place where we'd love to help out.
Thank you so much. I'd like to thank our panelists and again wish Mayor Williams a happy birthday, and would like to introduce my good friend Rebecca Bill Chavez, CEO and President of the Inter-American Dialogue.
Thanks, Marianne. It's such a pleasure to partner with Jason and with the Atlantic Council team on this event, and also, of course, with the Truman Center. I really think today's conversation it's a really important reminder that cities are on the front line when it comes to addressing today's most pressing challenges. And it's really great to see you. I'm sorry, can you hear me? Okay, so it's really wonderful to see you again, Mayor Hancock. For those of you who don't know Mayor Hancock, I think we've heard your name quite a bit. But Mayor Hancock is serving his 3rd term as Denver's mayor, and he's going to be hosting this upcoming April summit that we've all been talking about. When I've gotten to know Mayor Hancock a bit through previous exchanges, but Mayor Hancock's focus on equity as a North Star, I think, has been really critical to his success. And Mayor Hancock, I want to say that the Inter-American Dialogue is so grateful for your participation in our June Mayor Summit, where we launched our Cities Initiative. As you know, we gathered mayors from the United States and from Latin America, and I think Everyone took note of your comments on Denver's innovative approaches to integrating migrants into the local community. It's also great to see you, Marianne and Nina, who are both key to the success of that event. So today's conversations, we've been focusing on the upcoming City Summit, which, as Jason mentioned, is going to be a key deliverable in the next phase of the US chairmanship of the Summit of the Americas. So the last panel with Marianne, and it focused on opportunities for public and private sectors to support local mayors in advance of the summit. So Mayor Hancock, my first question for you are, what are some of the main policy objectives that you hope to achieve for the citizens of Denver at the summit?
Rebecca, first of all, thank you. Good to see you again, and I'm really glad to be a part of this conversation. And I got to tell you, we're very excited here in Denver to have been selected to host the City Summit next April. We are excited about what this is going to bring to our city in terms of exposure, but also an opportunity to talk about these global issues that impact so many of us around the world, particularly recognizing the role that we as local leaders play in impacting those conversations and impacting progress on them. So without question, I expect that we'll see and hear good conversation around sustainable development, climate action. I think when we talk about public safety and crime, as I learned in Los Angeles and talking with mayors from all over the hemisphere, we have a lot of common traits with regards to the challenges that we're facing with regards to crime and safety. The question around democracy renewal, I think is going to be very important. Women's empowerment, I think, will be a great policy discussion for the hemisphere and how we look at it on a global basis. And as some of the previous panelists have talked about, particularly the mayors, foreign direct investment, or direct foreign investment, excuse me, critically important for us to continue to drive that. But more importantly, overriding all of this, I really expect to see here discussions about how at the local level, we really drive and transact and impact relations and affairs on the global level, on the global scale. And as I talked about in our last discussion last week, or 2 weeks ago, President Eisenhower recognized that when he created the Sister Cities program, that at the very minute level, community and local levels, we're able to push global affairs and global relationship development. Because that's at the people level is really where it works and where it matters. And my hope is that this summit that occur next April here in Denver will only further those opportunities and recognize the power and the opportunity around our local and municipal leadership.
Thank you for that. And you actually really got at the question or the point that the last panel talked about this idea of focusing in on key issues. And I think you mentioned a number of them. And I think including public safety and crime, which is something that is, many of the major cities in Latin America and the Caribbean are focusing as well. But as a follow-up to the last panel, I'd love to hear how you'd like to see the private and public sectors working together to support your policy goals.
Well, I appreciate that because I think they're critical to all of this, right? As mayors, whether you're from the US or from Latin America, we spend a lot of time on the road, particularly outside of our own countries, trying to develop relationships and connect, particularly with the private sector, to drive investment, to drive the creation of new innovations and job opportunities for all the people we represent. And so we're going to work very hard to engage the private sector in these discussions that are going to take place here in Denver, make sure there's good interaction between mayors and the private sector, and also make sure that we are not only having them sit in the room, not for symbolic reasons, but really leaning in on the conversations about how we can solve some of these policy challenges. I was really glad to see the young man who works for MasterCard. MasterCard's been a global player, it's a global symbol, of course, but they have also leaned in on a lot of the issues that we're all focused on, whether it's democracy and it's voting, whether it's human rights, women's empowerment. These are the things that we need to see other private sector companies play a role in, particularly those are global national companies, because I think they have the power to help boost up and to create a great platform on these policy issues.
Thank you for that. And I agree. It's great to have you here, Mr. Lasavio, and to hear from a private sector, a member of the private sector who's focusing on this. So the city, we heard from Nina about Los Angeles, but the city of Denver is also a very successful global hub for foreign investment and cultural exchange. So how can the city summit and how can the city summit itself, how can it help other cities reap the benefits of international partnerships and exchange, such as those that already exist in Denver?
Yeah, I think Mayor Nichols said it best. That's at the very start and foundationally, we need to make sure that we learn from one another and that we share our best practices. You know, I'm going to be delivering my State of the City address this coming Monday. And one of the things we talked about is in 2011, I came into office with this focus on putting Denver on the global stage. Well, we had to work on the fundamentals of that. And we start by leveraging our greatest port. Bogota, Colombia, for example, may have trains or water ports as their greatest ports. Denver, we're landlocked. It was the airport. And so how do I use the second largest airport in the world, the fifth busy in the United States, to really transact a global engagement for Denver? And we leveraged it by going around the world and creating direct flights. Those direct flights have increased our tourism, international tourism, by 88%. We now have established almost 20 of them in the U.S. in Denver since I become mayor. It has driven our direct foreign investment. It's driven our tourism. It's driven international companies that have moved some of their headquarters or operations to Denver, creating jobs and opportunities. But also, it's improved our cultural relations, our foreign exchanges with students, and brought students from around the world to our university. So there is a connectivity. Great cities around the world are connected, and they're not only connected digitally, but they're connected physically. And it could be the airport, could be the water, it could be trains, but get connected, and thereby laying the foundation for further engagement on the global scale.
Thank you. So you referenced last week's Atlanta Council event with Mayor Garcetti, when you discussed the importance of cross-border collaboration and city diplomacy. Mm-hmm. So you've named a few, but the potential topics, but I also wonder what kind of similar engagements do you see as potentials for furthering this? Because it seems that we've got this process started. Yeah. What other ideas or suggestions would you have to carry this momentum forward?
Yeah, we started by really harnessing and leveraging our sister city relationships and making sure we refreshed them, if you will, when I came in as mayor. Then we created a concept called friendship cities, which kind of creates the opportunity to sign a friendship agreement with leadership that says we're going to work on building our educational, cultural, and economic connectivity with you, and then hopefully graduate to the sister city level. So we allow that to sit for a few years. And then we also work on direct connectivity. I say that very clearly, that you want to make sure that somehow you leverage whatever the greatest port you have to connect. You know, one of the things we also engaged were our universities and colleges, because we know that young people want to study abroad, and we wanted to invite young people from all over the world to study in Denver. We thought it'd be great, and we have seen that through our connectivity, our friendship agreements, leveraging our sister cities, through our cultural, educational, and economic exchanges. And we have seen the increase of number of students who are studying abroad come into Denver and study here, but also students who are leaving Denver to study abroad. And then finally, we don't just leave it to cultural and educational exchanges with our students. We have economic exchanges. We have an economic exchange program with our airport, and we bring in executives from other airports from around the world to spend 6 months with us, 6 weeks to 6 months with us, to study how we're doing things at our airport. And we also dispatch our own employees at the airport to foreign countries to do the same. So it is connectivity, getting to know people in the very basic community, minute level, and building affairs and engagement on those levels.
I love that point about educational exchange. I think Brian Nichols may no longer be with us, but it reminds me very much of his emphasis on educational exchanges, you know, such as the Fulbright program, and just the lasting connections that are made through this. So my last question is, about the topic. So you mentioned a potential one. You mentioned public safety. You mentioned women's empowerment, which I really appreciated. So one of the things I noticed in Los Angeles is I think that you and Mayor Lopez, Claudia Lopez of Bogota, had a lot in common when it came to your approach towards migrants.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could share, because this is such an issue, and I'm sure it's going to come up at the America Summit, given that it's a hemisphere-wide issue. It's not just about the U.S. southern border. So what would you mind kind of sharing some of the wonderful things that Denver is doing along these lines?
Yeah, the reality is that we really believe here that we want to be a welcoming and inclusive city. And what I didn't realize at the time, but we learned later, that our safety and our security starts with inclusion. There's nothing more dangerous to any of us in the world than a people without hope. And if you create a situation where people feel desperate and without hope, then they can potentially become a sale or even and dangerous to everybody around. And the reality is that we feel we want to be inclusive. We think we benefit from the value of diversity and making sure people feel good about the community that they're living in. They want to contribute and be productive in it. And that's very important to us. That's a value we carry. It's not a program, it's a value that we carry in our hearts in the city of Denver. And so we love immigrants, and we want immigrants to come here. We want them to study, we want them to work, be productive, and contribute to the quality of life of our community. And we just harness that diversity. So I think it's critically important that we stay involved and that we continue to do everything we can to promote those values and recognize and speak it as loud as we can from the hills that you are welcomed in Denver, Colorado, particularly if you're willing and ready to become a productive member of our communities and contribute to the value of diversity and inclusion.
Thank you so much for that. And I think your voice on this is really important because I think it helps with that narrative about immigrants as actually being a positive addition to whether it be to Denver or to the broader United States. So thank you for that. And so it's been a real pleasure to see you, Mayor Hancock. I look forward to seeing you in Denver. And I want to thank everyone who joined us for taking the time to hear from our wonderful panelists. And I very much encourage everyone to stay tuned for updates from the State Department, from the Adrian Arsh Latin America Center, from the Dialogue, Inter-American Dialogue, and from the Truman Center in advance of the Set City Summit this upcoming April in Denver. Thank you.